Greetings and welcome. This is a presentation for FPGA evolution, hardware evolution, genome-based selection of FPGA netlists for pulse identification. Presented by William Charles Gorski, UTArligton, 1002075149149, student ID. As a bit of background, there were some projects done in the 1990s regarding FPGAs, which indicated a portion of the chips themselves have tiles or logic cells, which could be reprogrammed and rewired multiple times a minute or even faster, using what's called a netlist to reorient specific wires, logical elements, and input-output pins along the perimeter of the chip. They were able to successfully detect a 1 kilohertz or a 10 kilohertz tone by using a genomic-based and mutation-based algorithm process. During this specific setup, what was used was a desktop computer with a PCI card containing a FPGA, which would also be used with an oscillator and a oscilloscope, which would detect the pulses from the 1 kilohertz to 10 kilohertz signals. So if the chip was programmed to listen to a 1 kilohertz chip, it would light up 1 kilohertz signal, it would light up that specific LED. If it was 10 kilohertz, it would light up a specific other LED. So it would identify the frequency of the input signal going through the desktop computer. My variation is very similar, and what it does is it detects the number of pulses per second using various tiles affiliated with the chip itself. So I present to you the Lattice 8K FPGA, which consists of 8,000 logical elements or tiles, and each specific tile has either zeros or ones per tile to reroute, to add in specific lookup tables or other logical based computations specific to each cell. When all the tiles have a 1 in it, as you can see from here, it's a very convoluted, compact net of possible wires. Conversely, when it's all zeros, it is essentially blank. And as you can see here, what I've done is I've written a program in Verilog that's called detect input, and across the various input-output pins in blue, or on the perimeter of the chip, it will light up a specific LED, as you can see from the working model, on this portion of the chip and run some logic to determine if that input is actually being high or low, depending upon what the pulse is. Here is basically what we can think of as the input of the chip, which consists of an audio plug, a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, where we can listen to ourselves and make sure that it is audible and we're not fooling anyone. And the gist of it is this PC right here will play a very specific different amounts of pulses. So 2 pulses per second, 7 pulses per second, 11 pulses per second, and so on. Eventually the project will involve only prime numbers. And if what is the goal of the project is to make sure that on one portion of the board the 2 or few pulses is illuminated, and on the opposite 41 or higher pulses per second is detected. Again, it will align itself with these specific LED patterns in such fashion. So how do we detect if we're doing something correct or not? Well, I have a camera here, and this camera is a simple USB cam, and it goes into almost like a theater box. You put the theater box over the LEDs and you take pictures. So what we can do during this automated solution, we can continuously keep video recordings, convert those into JPEG animation picture files, and upload those picture files 1 frame at a time, approximately 20 frames per second, into a data mining project called Weka. It's from New Zealand. I think it's called Waikiki or similar from New Zealand. It's open source, it's free for that university, and it's very powerful in terms of data mining. Using it's going to be essentially either neural network or a K-means clustering algorithm, we'll be able to tell if the snapshots from the camera are able to record the second or the 41st light bulb going on or off. And thus, if it matches the known tested correct pattern of 2 or 41, it will provide a grading score. So, for example, if it gets some of the lights on that are close to 2, it'll probably get something like a B+ or an A-. If it's something very far away, it still gets a high grade, but it's something more closer to a 50 or 60. So, how does the hardware evolution part play into this? Well, if we think of this specific layout as one child or one chip pattern, then if it has a score above a certain threshold, typically something around 70 for now, it will go on to the next gene pool of an iteration of a generation. So if this is one kid and another kid or child pattern is very, very similar to this and has a similar score, that will be the next generations of mom and dad chip, with which we take 50% of one parent and 50% of, say, another, and through I have a 10% mutation percentage too, so it's going to randomly keep things fuzzy and noisy, as if it were real life. And over time, there will be 50 kids per gene pool, and they will all be tested one at a time to make sure that the pulses are identified through the camera. And after each specific generation has all 50 tested, those with the highest scores will go on to the next generation, and those with the lowest scores will have their patterns completely removed from the gene pool. Now, the gene itself is really just a bunch of ones and zeros, as I indicated here. This would be a genome of all ones, and a blank purple square would be all zeros. Allow me to show you more on the screen itself what it looks like for a all zeros tile. So as you can see, it's straight up zeros the whole way for every specific part of the chip. This is an all zeros tile. As you can see, each tile is listed with zeros. It's really easy to detect. If we do all ones, it's very similar. All ones straight up and down every single piece of the tile. So if we take I made one specific example here that shows about half of the ones and zeros, but it's in kind of a mutated fashion. You'll see how it's got no real plan in terms of ones and zeros. It's really randomized. But as you can see, it's not all one and not all zero, but it is an intersection thereof. And again, it will be selected based on this specific outputs' score over and over and over and over again. Again, this can all be automated such that we try a tile setup like this child, run it through the chip, test it with our our camera, replay through the audio cable the number of pulses we wish to try and detect, and get a score for that child chip's layout. If the score is high, it goes on to the next round. If it's low, it is out of the gene pool forever, with the eventual goal of finding an accuracy of, if we hear 41 pulses go through the headphone jack, through the headphone wire into the input portion, then we should see only the 41 LED light up. If we hear 2 pulses go through, we should hear only 2. Now, the previous project, if you guys can see here, has fitness versus generations, and they had visible results at approximately 700 or even sooner in the dozens of generations. But to really get the best results, right here, there's a major arc here around 2,500 or 3,000 generations, which makes me think that it will take a similar amount of time to go through each generation of 50 chips before we find something with a very high bar of accuracy. I will be answering any questions that I receive from this and possibly able to upload it on YouTube as well. Thank you for your time.